late fall afternoon. Picture of myself riding. Shadow in the ditch. Nebraska countryside, October 21st, Monday. Hey YouTube, Born to be Wild, NE here. And as always, NE stands for Nebraska, Go Big Red E Huskers. Hey, this is going to be a vid that's going to be posted in my political and social commentary playlist. This will be considered by many to be fairly partisan. So be forewarned if you want to watch and listen. I'm an old fart now. The first presidential election that I was able to vote in and did vote in was Nixon's reelection campaign in 1972. Both my parents were registered GOP. I also registered GOP and remained that way for a long time, almost decades and decades. Between 35 and 40 years. I changed my registration to independent. In Nebraska, it might be called non-affiliated. I don't remember. But for me, and this is just me in my opinion, the GOP has morphed into something that I no longer want to be associated with. I look at what I consider to be the abuse of power by bodies of GOP politicians and conclude that I don't want to be a part of them. Just in the upcoming midterm election cycle, GOP in North Dakota has changed rules at a pretty last minute, which makes it pretty difficult for Native Americans, many of whom live on reservations in North Dakota, to vote and easily vote. These folks are United States citizens. They are eligible to vote. But the GOP is making arbitrary rules to make it harder for them. In West Texas, this situation has gone on for decades and decades. The GOP is once again making it difficult and hard and confusing for college students at a predominantly black university in western Texas to vote, even though they're citizens and of voting age, eligible to vote. In Georgia, the Secretary of State, who's running for the governor of the state at the same time, is holding on to a reported 53,000 registrations or voting records because of some arbitrary rule that the GOP has implemented, making it more difficult and more uncertain and more unclear and much harder for those folks to vote. an estimated 70% of that 53,000 in Georgia are African Americans, black Americans. The guy's opponent on the Democratic side is a black woman. Also in Georgia, as in other states, Indiana, etc., the GOP has been purging their voter rolls using arbitrary rules that they create that do nothing but confuse people, make it harder for people to vote. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the GOP in the Senate, refused to have a hearing for Merrick Garland, President Obama's nomination for an open Supreme Court seat. Once a Republican got in the Oval Office, and Mitch McConnell realized he only had a very slim majority of Republicans in the Senate, he decided to do away with the 60-vote threshold such that the last two nominations have been confirmed with very, very minimal majorities. Mitch McConnell has also done away with a tradition where if a judicial nominee for lower courts was opposed by a senator in that same state where the court opening was, that the nominee wouldn't be heard. He's done away with that so that he could move forward with placing nominees that meet his desires onto the courts. With the latest Supreme Court associate nomination, the GOP withheld an estimated 90% of the written record of the nominee so that his record could not be reviewed, understood, and questioned in confirmation hearings. In addition, 40-some thousand pages of records they did release were released to the Judicial Committee less than 24 hours before the hearings were to commence. No, I can't support the GOP anymore. I became an independent. I'm going to do something on November 6th that I've never done in my life. It doesn't bring me any joy to have reached the conclusion that this is what I must do, nor do I take any pride in it. I'm going to refrain from voting for any GOP candidate on the ballot that I have in front of me for any office, regardless of what governmental jurisdiction it is in. I am at my wit's end. The only way that we can try to send a message to the GOP that they've gone way too far, they're not acting in the country's best interests, is to vote and vote against them. So, unless a Democratic candidate is a known sleazeball or corrupt, et cetera, I'll be voting for every Democratic candidate. If there is a Slay's ball, I just won't vote for that particular office. In his farewell address, George Washington, our first president, warned the country about the dangers to the nation of political parties. He saw, and foretold, and predicted times in our nation's history where political parties would place their own interests and desires ahead of the nation's best interests. In my opinion, that's what the GOP has become. The trend that started back with Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House in the 80s. It's gotten worse and worse and worse, and more blatant and obvious. So that's where I am. I really, truly hope that the GOP would change and stop abusing their power. Oh, I didn't mention the GOP in North Carolina. A couple years ago, after a Democrat won the governorship, the GOP-dominated legislatures passed legislation which stripped the position of the governor of authorities and powers that they had, and the lame duck Republican governor signed them. So in essence, they said, well, all this was good enough if we had a Republican governor, but now that we're going to have a Democratic governor, it's not acceptable. And we don't want the Democratic governor having this power and that power. And, I mean, it's just amazing to me that was okay. And there's more cases. I just can't take the time to delineate them all. So some of you will be upset and have different opinions. And I say again, that's okay. I absolutely respect and support your right to your own opinions and your own thoughts and your right to reaching your own conclusions. And if you'd like to debate, argue, deliberate, discuss differences of opinions, difference of policy or philosophy politically, I'm all for that. Feel free to do that in the comments below. I would only ask that we practice ways of disagreeing, even strongly disagreeing, but we do it with civility and while keeping respect for each other as fellow citizens and fellow human beings. Our country is so divided and being torn apart, and too many of us are so quick to personally attack those we disagree with, to call those who we disagree with names, demean them, put them down. And when we do that, regardless of which side it's coming from, barriers to communication go up. And we just drive the wedge of division ever deeper into our country. So I've laid out my position and the reasons. I've laid out that I'm not bragging or happy that I felt I had to come to that kind of position. If you disagree, if you want to discuss, if you want to deliberate, feel free to comment below. I'd ask any and all who choose to do that or to respond to comments left to be civil and respectful to each other, especially to those with which we disagree. Take care, all.